I still work nights at the Desert View Motor Lodge, even though the motel has been closed for almost 6 years. I know how that sounds. There are no guests. There has not been a reservation since before I started. The swimming pool is empty, the restaurant has been stripped down to bare concrete, and most of the room televisions are stacked in a storage unit outside Tucson. The owner stopped paying me 3 months ago. I still show up 4 nights a week. The reason is simple. I left once. Room 12 did not stay there. I should explain how I got the job. At the time, I was 34 years old and working temporary warehouse shifts around Phoenix. I had spent 11 years at the same distribution center before the company moved most of its operation to Nevada. They gave us 6 weeks of severance and a packet about retraining programs. The severance paid off 1 credit card and covered part of what I owed my ex-wife. It did not last long. By the end of that summer, I was taking whatever work I could find. Overnight stocking, loading trucks, cleaning office buildings after everyone went home. Night work suited me. I have never been especially good with people. I am not unfriendly. I just do better when nobody expects me to talk. Give me a list of tasks and a quiet building, and I am fine. The motel job came through a man named Gene Harlow. Gene had been a maintenance supervisor at the warehouse. He was in his late 60s and had the kind of face that always looked sunburned, even indoors. After the distribution center closed, he called me and asked whether I was still looking for night work. He said his sister owned an old motel beside State Route 86, about 20 miles outside the boundary of Red Basin National Monument. I had driven through that part of the state before. There was not much out there. A gas station, a ranger checkpoint, 2 small settlements, and long sections of road where you could drive half an hour without passing another vehicle. Gene told me the motel was closed for renovations. That was not exactly true. The Desert View had been closed after a water inspection found contamination in the well. The county ordered the owners to replace most of the underground plumbing before reopening. Gene's sister had started the work, run out of money, and spent the next several years trying to sell the property. In the meantime, people kept breaking in. Copper had been pulled from 3 rooms. Someone had stolen the air conditioning unit from the restaurant roof. Teenagers sometimes drove out from the nearest town to drink in the empty pool. The insurance company wanted someone on the property overnight. Gene offered me $18 an hour, 4 nights a week, from 9 at night until 6 in the morning. The job involved watching cameras, walking the property once every hour, checking the boiler pressure, and calling the sheriff if anyone tried to enter. It was not great money, especially with the drive, but it was steady. I asked how soon I could start. Gene told me to come out the following afternoon. The Desert View sat at the end of a cracked frontage road behind a row of dead cottonwood trees. From the highway, it looked like the kind of motel people stopped at only because they had already passed everything better. There were 18 rooms arranged in a shallow U around an empty swimming pool. Each room opened directly onto an exterior walkway. The office and old restaurant formed the front of the property, facing the highway. A faded sign stood near the entrance. Desert View Motor Lodge. Clean rooms. Color TV. Vacancy. The word vacancy was made from individual red bulbs. Half of them had burned out, so at certain angles it looked like the sign said vacancy. The office was cleaner than I expected. There was an old front desk, a vinyl couch, 2 vending machines, and a wall of wooden boxes where the room keys had once been kept. Behind the desk was a narrow back office with a small refrigerator, a microwave, a desk, and 6 security monitors. The cameras were old. The images were in color, but the colors were washed out. The parking lot looked gray during the day. At night, the desert beyond the motel disappeared completely. Jean showed me the alarm panel, the breaker box, the office phone, and the emergency radio. The radio connected to a ranger station inside Red Basin. Jean said cell service dropped out during storms, so the previous owner had arranged to use the park frequency in emergencies. There was another employee named Marisol Reyes, although everyone called her Mari. She worked mornings and came in 3 days a week to collect mail, check the plumbing, and clean the office. She was around 50 and had worked at the motel back when it was still open. Mari was there during my interview. She did not say much. She sat behind the front desk with a cup of coffee, listening while Jean explained the job. Every few minutes she looked toward the wall of key boxes. I assumed she was bored. Jean walked me around the property. Most of the rooms were empty except for bed frames and old curtains. A few had furniture covered in plastic. The doors were painted brown, with brass numbers fixed above the handles. Room 12 was at the far end of the north walkway. Its curtains were closed. Unlike the other rooms, its air conditioning unit was still installed. I remember noticing that because the metal housing looked newer than the others. When I asked Jean about it, he said, "That one stays locked." He did not explain why. The tour ended in the office. Jean opened a drawer and gave me a ring with 3 keys. One opened the lobby. One opened the maintenance shed. The third opened every guest room except room 12. He also handed me a clipboard. The top sheet was a basic security checklist. It had spaces for the time, boiler pressure, weather, vehicle count, and notes from each hourly patrol. Below that was a diagram of the property with a small box beside each room number. I was supposed to place a check in each box after inspecting the door and window. Room 12 had a thick black line through its box. I noticed it, but I did not ask. Jean seemed eager to leave. He gave me a short employee handbook, then reached under the counter and pulled out a folded sheet of yellow paper. "This matters more than the handbook," he said. The paper had been folded so many times that the creases had started to split. The rules were handwritten in blue ink. Some looked older than the others. The final 2 had been added in black marker. There were 7 rules. I read them while Jean stood on the other side of the desk. At the beginning of the shift, count the keys on the board without touching them. There should be 17. If there are 18, wait outside beneath the motel sign until 9:15. Do not take a key with you. Lock the lobby doors at 11:15 p.m. After that time, do not open them for anyone. Anyone with a legitimate reason to enter will have a key. If the vacancy sign changes to NO vacancy, switch off the breaker marked sign for exactly 1 minute. Do not watch the security monitors while the breaker is off. Do not check room 12. If an alarm, light, sound, or camera indicates activity in room 12, write 12 quiet in the log and continue your duties. If the office phone rings twice and stops, remove the receiver from the cradle for 10 minutes. If the phone rings while the receiver is off the cradle, lock yourself in the restroom until it becomes silent. At 2:17 a.m., keep camera 6 on the widest view. Do not zoom in on anyone near the swimming pool. If they turn toward the office, close your eyes and count silently to 60. Before leaving in the morning, check the registration printer. If it has produced a guest card overnight, do not read it. Place it in the envelope marked returns and deposit the envelope in the manager's safe. Never sign the card. I read the list twice. Then I looked at Jean. "Is this some kind of insurance thing?" He glanced at Mari. She lowered her eyes to her coffee. Jean said, "It's just how we do things here." "The camera rule?" "Old equipment." "And the phone?" "Old phone." I smiled a little, thinking he was making a joke. He did not smile back. I asked about room 12. Jean took the paper from me, folded it, and placed it inside the employee handbook. "You don't need to go near that door," he said. "There's nothing in there you're responsible for." I waited for more. There was none. At that point, I assumed the rules had been written to scare off teenagers or to test new employees. I had worked in warehouses where supervisors invented pointless procedures because nobody had bothered to remove them from the manuals. I had seen warning signs left on machinery that had not been used in 20 years. Old workplaces collect strange habits. That was what I told myself. I accepted the job. My first shift was the following Monday. I arrived at 8:45 with a thermos of coffee, a sandwich, and a paperback novel I expected to finish by morning. The sun had already gone down behind the low mountains. The motel sign buzzed beside the highway. Moths moved around the red bulbs. Jean was waiting in the office. He showed me how to fill out the night log, then made me count the keys. 17 keys hung from the board. The box for room 12 was empty. Jean watched until I finished. "Never touch them while you count," he said. "Why?" "You'll lose track." He said it seriously enough that I did not argue. At 9 he left. I watched his truck travel down the frontage road and turn onto the highway. His taillights disappeared behind the trees. Then I was alone. The first 2 hours were exactly what I expected. I walked the property at 10. The night was still warm. Insects clicked in the weeds near the drain pool. The highway produced a low sound whenever a truck passed, then everything became quiet again. I started at room 1 and moved clockwise. At each door, I checked the handle, looked at the window, and marked the box on the clipboard. Some of the curtains were open. The rooms behind them looked unfinished and ordinary. Bare mattresses, paint cans, plastic sheets, old lamps with no shades. When I reached room 12, I crossed the walkway without stopping. The porch light above the door was off. I did not place a mark in its box. The black line made that easy. I finished the patrol, checked the boiler gauge, and returned to the office. At 11:15, I locked the lobby doors. Nothing happened. I heated my sandwich. I read 50 pages of my book. I wrote down the time each vehicle passed the entrance. At 12:23, camera 4 flickered. Camera 4 covered the south walkway, including rooms 2 through 7. The image rolled once and became steady. A white plastic chair was sitting outside room 5. I had not noticed it during my patrol. There were several chairs stacked near the maintenance shed, so I assumed one had been left out. At 1, I went around again. The chair was not outside room 5. It was outside room 7. I stood there for a moment, holding the clipboard. There was no wind. The chair was light enough to move, but not that far. It would have needed to travel past 2 doors and around a concrete support. I checked behind it. Nothing. I checked the nearby windows. All empty. I dragged the chair back to the maintenance shed and placed it on top of the stack. When I returned to the office, camera 4 showed a chair outside room 5 again. I remember leaning close to the screen. The image was grainy, but it was definitely the same kind of chair. I looked through the lobby window toward the south walkway. From that angle, I could see the corner of room 5. There was no chair. The camera showed one. The real walkway did not. I told myself it was a frozen image. That would have made sense, except the timestamp was still moving. I restarted the monitor. When the picture returned, the chair was gone. I did not mention it to anyone. A camera glitch was not worth waking Jean. At 2, I performed another patrol. The property felt different by then. Nothing had actually changed. The temperature had dropped a few degrees. The road was quieter. The vending machine in the lobby hummed loudly whenever its compressor started. Still, I became aware of how far I was from everything. The nearest occupied building was a Ranger equipment depot about 7 miles east. Jean's house was almost an hour away. If someone came onto the property, I would see them long before help arrived. I finished the patrol and returned to the office at 2:12. At 2:16, I remembered Rule 6. Camera 6 covered the swimming pool. The camera was attached to the corner of the restaurant roof. Its wide view showed the pool, part of the north walkway, and the empty parking spaces near rooms 10 through 15. I made sure the image was fully zoomed out. At 2:17, a shape appeared near the deep end of the pool. It did not enter from either side of the frame. One moment the concrete was empty. The next, someone was standing beside the pool. The person wore dark clothes and faced away from the office. I reached for the zoom control. The rule came back to me before I touched it. Do not zoom in. I pulled my hand away. I watched the figure. For several seconds, it did not move. Then it bent slightly at the waist, as if looking down into the empty pool. I picked up the office phone and considered calling Jean. The figure straightened. Its head began to turn toward the office. I closed my eyes. I counted silently. 1, 2, 3. By 12 I felt stupid. By 20, I wanted to look. I could hear the vending machine. I could hear the air conditioner above me. Somewhere outside, a truck moved along the highway. At 38, the office phone rang once. I kept counting. It rang again. Then it stopped. I reached 60. When I opened my eyes, camera 6 showed an empty pool. The digital time read 2 hours 19 minutes and 11 seconds. I stared at the screen until it reached 2:20. Then I remembered Rule 5. If the office phone rang twice and stopped, remove the receiver for 10 minutes. I lifted it from the cradle. There was no dial tone. I placed it on the desk. At 2:24, while the receiver was lying beside my hand, the phone rang. The sound was softer than the normal ring. It came from inside the receiver. I could feel the vibration through the desk. I stood so quickly that the chair rolled into the wall. The restroom was at the end of the back hall. I went inside, locked the door, and turned on the light. The restroom was small. 1 toilet. 1 sink. No window. The phone continued ringing in the office. It rang at steady intervals. I counted 11 rings. Then 13. Then I stopped counting. After a while, the ringing became quieter. I realized it was not becoming quieter because the phone was stopping. It was becoming quieter because another sound had started closer to me. Someone was tapping on the restroom door. The taps were light. 3 at a time. Tap. 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 A pause. Then 3 more. I stood with my back against the sink. I considered calling the sheriff from my cell phone, but there was no signal. The tapping continued. After the 4th set, a man spoke from the hallway. "Daniel?" It sounded like Jean. His voice was calm. "Daniel, open the door." I did not answer. He tried the handle once. "You left the phone off the hook." The restroom door was cheap hollow wood. If someone wanted to enter, the lock would not have stopped them. "Daniel?" I looked at my watch. The phone had been off the cradle for 7 minutes. The voice on the other side of the door said my full name. Daniel Mercer. Jean had used my full name during the interview. There was nothing impossible about that. I almost opened the door. Then I heard the office phone ringing again. The man outside stopped talking. The restroom handle slowly returned to its resting position. I stayed where I was. The phone rang 2 more times. Then everything became silent. I waited another 5 minutes before leaving. The hallway was empty. The lobby doors were still locked. The receiver was lying on the desk where I had left it. I picked it up. A dial tone returned immediately. I checked the cameras. No person. No vehicle. No movement. Camera 6 showed the empty pool. I called Gene. He answered on the 5th ring. I told him about the figure by the pool, the phone, and the voice outside the restroom. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he asked, "Did you open the door?" "No." "Did you answer the voice?" "No." "Did you zoom the camera?" "No." His breathing became slower. "Then you're fine. That isn't an explanation. The phone lines cross sometimes. There's an old extension in the maintenance shed. The voice knew my name. I told you the phone lines cross." I looked at the lobby monitor. "Was that you outside?" "No." "Did you drive back?" "No." "Then who was it?" Gene sighed. "Finish the shift. We'll talk in the morning." He hung up. I considered leaving. I had my truck. The lobby was secure. Nothing in the job description said I had to stay if someone was trespassing. Then I thought about the money. I had been unemployed for almost 2 months. My daughter's school fees were due. I had already borrowed from my mother. I told myself I had probably heard Jean's voice through the office phone. Sound traveled strangely in the small hallway. The tapping could have come from the pipes. I knew that explanation was weak. It was still better than the alternative. I completed the 3 o'clock patrol. The plastic chair did not reappear. Room 12 remained dark. At 4:30, I noticed a green light flashing on the printer beneath the front desk. The motel still had an old registration system connected to a small dot matrix printer. Jean had told me it was no longer attached to any working computer. A sheet of paper was feeding through it. I approached carefully. The printer made a slow grinding sound. When it stopped, the top of a registration card was visible. I could have read the first line. I did not. Rule 7 said not to read it. I found the envelope marked returns, removed the card without turning it over, and placed it inside. The paper felt warm. As I pushed it into the envelope, I saw 3 letters through the thin paper. Mayor. Those were the first 3 letters of my last name. I closed the envelope before I could see anything else. The manager's safe was built into the wall beneath the key boxes. It had a narrow deposit slot. I slid the envelope through. It did not fall. Something inside seemed to be blocking the slot. I pushed harder. The envelope moved halfway in, then stopped again. From inside the safe, someone pulled it out of my fingers. I heard the paper drop. I stood there, staring at the slot. The safe required a combination. Jean had not given it to me. I returned to the back office and did not approach the front desk again until sunrise. Mari arrived at 6:05. She unlocked the lobby and came inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked at me once and stopped. "You saw the pool," she said. It was not a question. I asked how she knew. "You look like the others did." "What others?" She placed 1 cup on the desk. "Gene didn't tell you." "He didn't tell me anything." Mari walked to the keyboard and counted without touching. 17. Then she looked at the night log. I had written about the camera figure and the phone. Beside the entry, I had included the words 12 quiet even though nothing had happened near room 12. I do not remember deciding to write them. Mari touched the entry with 1 finger. "Did you go to 12? "No." "Did you look in the window?" "No." "Good." I asked her what was inside. She did not answer. She opened the lower desk drawer and removed a fresh log sheet. You should go home. I stayed where I was. Mari, somebody spoke outside the restroom. I believe you. It knew my name. I believe that too. Then tell me what this is. She looked toward the locked lobby door. The sky outside was turning gray. I worked here when the motel was open, she said. Some nights were normal. Some weren't. The rules made the bad nights shorter. That's it. That is all I know for certain. What happened to the other guards? Mari looked down at the log. Most quit. Most? She folded the page and placed it in the drawer. One stopped coming. I asked his name. She said, Caleb. Then she told me to go home. I slept badly that morning. At 11, I woke to a voicemail from Gene. He said I had done everything correctly and that the first night was usually the worst because I had not learned the building's noises. He offered me an extra $1 an hour if I agreed to return. I listened to the message 3 times. A sensible person would have quit. I did not. The money was part of it. The other part was embarrassment. In daylight, the events at the motel seemed less serious. I had seen a person on a bad camera. I had heard a voice in a building with an old telephone system. A printer had produced a piece of paper. I had no proof that anything supernatural had happened. I also did not like the thought of Jean and Mari discussing how I had lasted only one night. So I returned. My second shift was almost completely normal. The keys numbered 17. The vacancy sign stayed lit. Camera 6 showed nothing at 2:17. The phone did not ring. A registration card did not print. At 5:50, I caught myself feeling disappointed. That reaction bothered me. Fear was easier to dismiss when I was actively experiencing it. During the quiet hours, curiosity took over. I began to wonder what the camera figure would have looked like up close. I wondered what name had been printed on the registration card. Most of all, I wondered why Jean had singled out room 12. On my third night, I stopped beside room 11 during the midnight patrol. Room 12 was 10 feet away. Its window was covered by thick curtains. The door was clean compared with the others. There were no scratches around the lock and no dust on the threshold. The air conditioning unit beneath the window was silent. I stepped toward it. The rules said not to check room 12. I told myself walking past was not checking. I moved close enough to see my reflection in the dark window. Nothing moved behind the curtains. I leaned slightly to examine the door handle. A television turned on inside. The sound was low, but unmistakable. A man was reading a weather report. Clear skies overnight, he said. Temperatures falling into the low 70s. I froze. The forecast continued. Travelers along Route 86 should expect reduced visibility after midnight. I looked toward the highway. The sky was clear. The television voice said, "A dust advisory remains in effect near the Desert View Motor Lodge." I stepped backward. The television became silent. The porch light above room 12 turned on. I did not wait to see anything else. I returned to the office and wrote 12 quiet in the log. On camera 5, the porch light appeared to be off. I could see it shining through the office window. The camera showed darkness. I stayed behind the desk until 1. When I went out for the next patrol, the porch light was off again. There was an object lying outside the door. It looked like a room service menu. The motel had not offered room service. The old restaurant had served breakfast, but guests had to come to the dining room. I did not touch the paper. I continued around the property. At sunrise, the object was gone. I told Mari. She asked whether I had read it. I said no. She nodded. Then it doesn't matter. I was getting tired of that answer. What happens if I read something? I don't know. What happens if I open the door? I don't know. What is the point of the rules if nobody knows what happens? Mari poured water into the office coffee machine. The point is that we are still here. She said it without drama. That made it worse. During the next 2 weeks, I settled into the job. Most shifts were quiet. I learned which cameras flickered during hot weather. I learned how long the boiler took to lose pressure and which exterior lights needed to be tapped before they came on. I became used to the highway sounds. I started bringing better meals. Sometimes Mari left food in the refrigerator for me. Rice, beans, chicken wrapped in foil. She never stayed after sunset. Gene came by once or twice a week. He delivered bottled water, collected the logs, and checked the safe. He never opened the returns envelopes while I was present. When I asked what was printed on the cards, he told me they were blank. I knew he was lying. On my 7th shift, the vacancy sign changed. It happened at 12:41. The red word vacancy went dark. A second row of bulbs lit beneath it. No vacancy. I had never noticed those bulbs before. The motel sign was visible through the lobby window. The words glowed clearly against the dark road. I went to the breaker panel. The switch-marked sign was number 3. I placed my fingers on it. Then I remembered the second part of the rule. Do not watch the security monitors while the breaker is off. I turned every monitor away from me. The screens were mounted on adjustable arms, so I pointed them toward the wall. Then I switched off the breaker. The lobby lights stayed on. The sign outside went dark. I used my wristwatch to count 1 minute. At 20 seconds, gravel crunched in the parking lot. A car had turned in. I heard its tires move slowly toward the office. I did not look at the monitors. Headlights swept across the lobby ceiling. The vehicle stopped outside. Someone tried the lobby door. The handle moved down, then up. A woman knocked on the glass. Hello? I stared at the breaker panel. Is anyone there? The knock came again. We need a room. The motel was closed. The entrance was blocked by 2 orange barriers and a chain. Any driver would have seen them. The woman knocked harder. My son is sick. I looked at my watch. 38 seconds. Please. A child coughed outside. The sound was weak. I thought about Rule 2. Do not open the lobby after 11:15. Anyone with a legitimate reason to enter would have a key. This woman was not trying to enter for work. She needed help. The rule had not accounted for that. I started toward the window. The child coughed again. This time, the sound came from the hallway behind me. I stopped. The woman outside said, "He can't breathe." The same words came from the back office, spoken in a child's voice. My watch reached 55 seconds. I switched the breaker on. The vacancy sign lit normally. Vacancy. I turned toward the window. There was no car outside. No headlights. No woman. The parking lot was empty. I kept the monitors turned toward the wall for another minute. When I finally faced them forward, Camera 2 showed an empty parking lot. Camera 5 showed the north walkway. The porch light above room 12 was on. I wrote 12 quiet. At 1 I went outside. There were no tire tracks in the gravel. There were, however, 2 handprints on the lobby glass. One was at the height of an adult. The other was lower. Both prints were on the inside. I cleaned them with glass spray. By the time Mari arrived, they had returned. She cleaned them again without commenting. A few nights later, the motel used my daughter's voice for the first time. Her name is Leah. She was 8 then. After my divorce, she lived with her mother in Tucson. I saw her every second weekend and called her most evenings. Leah had a habit of leaving long voicemails when I missed her calls. She would tell me what she had eaten, what she was watching, and which kids at school had annoyed her that day. I saved most of them. That night, I played one while eating dinner in the back office. Leah talked about a science project involving bean plants. Halfway through the message, the office phone rang twice and stopped. I paused the voicemail. The motel became quiet. I removed the receiver and placed it on the desk. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the receiver produced the soft ringing sound. I went to the restroom and locked the door. The phone rang 6 times. After the 6th ring, Leah began speaking in the office. "Dad?" It was her voice. Not similar. Not a child who happened to sound like her. It was Leah. "Dad, I forgot the green folder." The green folder was part of the voicemail I had just played. She needed it for her science project. I knew the motel could have heard the recording. I kept quiet. "Dad?" Her voice moved closer to the hallway. "I'm outside." The restroom handle did not move. "Can you come get me?" I placed both hands over my mouth. "I don't like this room." That sentence had not been in the voicemail. The light above me flickered. Leah said, "There's someone in the bathroom." She whispered it from the other side of the door. At the same moment, something shifted behind the shower curtain beside me. I had not paid attention to the curtain before. There was no shower in that restroom. Only a toilet and sink. The curtain hung across a section of wall. I slowly turned my head. A narrow gap showed between the curtain and the tiles. Behind it was darkness. The walls should have been inches away. The darkness continued farther than the restroom could have allowed. I heard a child breathing inside. Leah knocked on the door. "Dad, don't let him out." The curtain moved toward me. Not much. Only an inch. I closed my eyes. I do not know why. There was no rule telling me to. I heard the curtain rings slide across the metal rod. Then the office phone stopped ringing. When I opened my eyes, the curtain was gone. There was only a tiled wall. I waited until my watch showed 10 minutes. The hallway was empty. My cell phone displayed 1 missed call from Leah's mother. I called her immediately. Leah was asleep. My ex-wife said she had called because Leah wanted to know whether I had found the green folder in my truck. I drove to Tucson after my shift and delivered it myself. I did not tell them what had happened. I did not go back to the motel that night. Gene covered my shift. The next morning, he called and told me the job was mine if I still wanted it. I asked him whether he had heard anything. "No." "Did the phone ring?" "No." "Did you see anyone near the pool?" "No." "Was room 12 quiet?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Room 12 is always quiet." I returned the following night. I have asked myself many times why. Money was still part of it. Pride was part of it too. But I think the main reason was that the motel had used Leah's voice. Until then, I could pretend the incidents were random. After that, the place felt personal. Leaving without understanding seemed dangerous. I wanted to know what it knew. That was another mistake. The next month followed a pattern. 2 or 3 quiet nights would pass. Then something small would happen. The key count would reach 18. The first time, I counted again. 18. All the boxes were filled. The key hanging in room 12's box had a round brass tag turned backward. I did not touch it. I went outside and stood beneath the motel sign until 9:15. The desert was hot even after sunset. Traffic moved on the highway behind me. From the office, I heard the lobby door open. The lock should have required a key. I heard someone walk behind the front desk. At 9:12, the room lights turned on one after another. Room 1. Room 2. Room 3. The lights continued around the courtyard. I watched without moving. Room 10. Room 11. They stopped before room 12. At 9:15, every light went dark. I returned to the office. The lobby door was locked. There were 17 keys on the board. Room 12's box was empty. Another night, the registration printer produced 3 cards. I placed them inside a returns envelope without reading them. As I carried the envelope toward the safe, a voice came from inside it. The sound was muffled by the paper. "Front desk?" I almost dropped it. "Front desk, I need to check out." I pushed the envelope into the safe. The voice continued until the paper fell beyond the slot. On another night, camera 6 showed a man near the pool at 2:17. He was wearing my security jacket. The jacket I was wearing at that moment. The figure faced away. I kept the camera wide. He lifted one hand and touched the back of his head. A second later, I felt something touch my hair. I closed my eyes before the figure turned. When I reached 60, my right sleeve was damp. There was no water anywhere nearby. I stopped bringing personal photographs into the office. I stopped playing voicemails. I removed Leah's name from my phone contacts and replaced it with a symbol, although I knew that would not help. The motel was not reading the screen. It was listening. Maybe it was listening to more than sound. Jean and Mari continued behaving as if the job were unusual but manageable. They never mocked me. They also never explained anything. When I asked about Caleb, the missing guard, Jean said he had probably moved away. Mari told me that was not true. She said Caleb had worked at the motel for 9 months. One morning, his truck was still parked outside, but he was gone. His keys were on the desk. The final line in the night log read, "Room 12 checked at 4:32. The words were followed by Caleb's initials. That was all Mari would tell me. I thought I understood what had happened. Caleb had gone to room 12. He had checked the door or looked through the window. Maybe he had opened it. The warning seemed obvious. Do not check room 12. Stay away from it. For the first 3 months, that interpretation kept me safe. Then I found the old logs. The motel office had a storage room behind the boiler closet. I had been told it contained tax records and maintenance documents. One slow night, a water pipe began leaking near the ceiling. I entered the storage room to find the shut-off diagram. There were dozens of boxes stacked against the walls. Some were labeled by year. Others contained guest receipts, repair invoices, and employee files. I found the plumbing diagram in a metal cabinet. Behind it was a black binder marked Night Audit, 1989 to 1992. I do not know why I opened it. The binder contained old security sheets. The layout was almost identical to the one I used. There was a property diagram, a space for boiler readings, and boxes beside each room number. Every room had been checked except room 12. Page after page. Different handwriting. Different employees. The box beside room 12 was always blank. In the margins, workers had written short reminders. 12 light on. Left unchecked. Call from 12 at 1:10. No response. Key returned to board. Did not count again. One note had been underlined twice. Do not check 12. An unchecked room stays empty. I read that line several times. An unchecked room stays empty. Not an unopened room. Not an unvisited room. An unchecked room. I turned back to the security sheet on my clipboard. Every hour, I had been placing checkmarks beside rooms 1 through 18. Room 12's box was crossed out with black marker, so I had never marked it. I had assumed the checkmark meant I had inspected the door. The old note suggested something else. The room stayed empty because nobody checked the box. My hands began to shake. I looked through more pages. For years, the box remained blank. Then I reached a sheet dated August 14, 1992. Room 12 had been checked. The mark was small and neat. The employee's initials were JH. Below it, someone had written. He said his wife was inside. The next sheet had no mark beside room 12, but the room was listed in the occupancy section. One guest. No name. The following night, room 12 was listed again. 2 guests. 3 nights later for guests. The room remained listed as occupied for the rest of the binder. I turned the page faster. The guest count changed constantly. 1, 6, 2, 11. Once, the number was 34. The handwriting became less careful. Several sheets contained the same sentence. Do not let them check out. The final page was dated November 3, 1992. There was no occupancy count. Every room box was blank. Across the property diagram, someone had written, "We moved the number." A noise came from the storage room doorway. I closed the binder. Mari was standing there. She wore her coat and held the office keys. It was 5:58 in the morning. I had not heard her arrive. "You found those," she said. I asked her what it meant. She looked at the binder. "Jean was supposed to remove them. Remove them or destroy them? I don't know. What does remove the number mean?" Mari did not answer. I took the binder into the office and placed it on the desk. "Was room 12 always at the end of the north walkway?" "No." The answer came quietly. "Where was it?" "The numbers used to start at the restaurant side. There were only 16 rooms when the motel opened. They built 2 more later." "So which one was 12? Mari looked around the lobby. For a moment, I thought she was confused. Then she pointed toward the floor beneath the front desk. "Here." I laughed once. I did not find anything funny. It was an automatic response. The office was a room? The office was 3 rooms. 10, 11, and 12. They knocked down the walls when they expanded the lobby. I looked at the restroom hallway. The back office. The place where I spent every night. Then what is the room marked 12 now? 14. Why change the number? Because people kept asking for 12. Guests? Sometimes. Who else? Mari picked up the old binder. People who had never been here. I remembered the curtain in the restroom. The darkness behind it. The child breathing where a wall should have been. My mouth felt dry. The rule says not to check room 12. Yes. You let me think it meant the room outside. That keeps people away from the door. But the door isn't room 12. The number matters. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. I pointed at the black line through room 12's box on my clipboard. The checkmark matters too. Mari looked at it. Yes. Why? I don't know. What happens if I mark it? She held the old binder against her chest. Something knows it has been given a room. And then? It checks in. The vending machine compressor started behind us. Both of us flinched. I asked whether Caleb had marked the box. Mari nodded. Did he open the door? We don't know. Did you find him? No. Then why keep hiring guards? The insurance company requires someone at night. I stared at her. She looked ashamed as soon as she said it. That cannot be the real reason. No. What is? Mari glanced toward the back office. If nobody is here, the checkmarks appear by themselves. I resigned that morning. I left my keys on the desk and told Gene not to contact me again. He did not argue. That surprised me more than anything. He said he understood. He paid me for the week and added $200 in cash. Before I left, he asked whether I had ever marked room 12. I said no. He checked the sheet himself. The box was blank. Then you should be all right, he said. I drove home. For 10 days, nothing happened. I found another warehouse job. The pay was lower, but it was in the city and ended before midnight. I slept through the night. I took Leah to a movie. I started telling myself the desert view had been a bad period in my life, made worse by isolation and lack of sleep. Then, on the 11th night, my apartment phone rang at 2:17. I did not own an apartment phone. The sound came from the kitchen. I stood in the hallway for almost a minute before going to investigate. An old beige telephone was sitting on the kitchen counter. I had never seen it before. The cord ran behind the refrigerator. There was no telephone connection in the apartment. It rang twice. Then it stopped. I knew the rule. I removed the receiver and placed it on the counter. The receiver began ringing in my hand. I locked myself in the bathroom. Someone tapped on the door. 3 times. A pause. 3 more. Then Jean's voice said, "Daniel, you left the desk." I stayed inside until sunrise. When I came out, the telephone was gone. On the kitchen counter, there was a motel registration card. I did not read it. I placed it inside a grocery bag and drove it back to the desert view. Gene was waiting in the office. He looked as if he had not slept. The keyboard held 18 keys. We stood outside beneath the motel sign until 9:15. Neither of us spoke. When we returned, there were 17. Gene unlocked the manager's safe and told me to deposit the registration card. Before I did, I asked what would happen if I stayed away. He rubbed both hands over his face. "I don't know. It came to my apartment." "I know." "How?" "I don't know." "Why me? You worked here long enough for it to hear you. That is not a reason." "No." He looked toward the back office. "It may stop after a while." "Did it stop for Caleb?" Gene did not answer. I placed the card into a returns envelope and deposited it in the safe. Something pulled the envelope from my fingers. That night I went back to work. I told myself it was temporary. I thought if I followed the rules for another week, whatever had attached itself to me would return to the motel. For the first few nights, that seemed to work. The phone stopped appearing in my apartment. I did not hear voices at home. I began sleeping normally again. At the motel, the activity became worse. Room 12's porch light turned on almost every night. The vacancy sign changed 3 or 4 times per shift. The registration printer produced cards with increasing frequency. Sometimes the cards printed continuously until the paper tray was empty. I stopped using separate envelopes and began placing them all in one thick stack. I never read them. I did notice that each card had the same weight and warmth. They felt recently handled. At 2:17, the figure near the pool appeared more often. Sometimes it wore my jacket. Sometimes it wore Jean's clothes. Once, it looked like Leah. I recognized the way she stood with one knee bent. I closed my eyes before it turned. The most difficult nights were the quiet ones. Silence made me think the motel was waiting for me to make a mistake. I began checking the clipboard constantly. The black line through room 12's box remained dark and thick. I replaced the sheet every morning. Some nights, the line looked slightly faded by the end of my shift. I started drawing over it with a marker. Mari told me not to. Changing the sheet draws attention, she said. From what? She did not answer. One night in early October, a dust storm moved through the area. The weather service had issued warnings all afternoon. By 10, the wind was carrying sand across the parking lot in long sheets. Traffic disappeared from the highway. The motel lights flickered. Gene called and told me the power might fail. He said the backup generator should start automatically. If it did not, I was supposed to remain in the office until sunrise. What about the rounds? Skip them. The rules don't say to skip them. The rules were written before the new generator. That did not reassure me. At 11:15, I locked the lobby. At 11:40, the exterior lights went out. The office remained powered, but every room walkway became dark. The cameras switched to grainy black and white night mode. Sand moved through the images. At midnight, I attempted to record the boiler pressure. The gauge needle shook too badly to read. I wrote storm in the log. Then I checked the room diagram. The black line through room 12's box looked thinner. I found a marker and drew over it. The marker produced no ink. I tested it on the edge of the page. A thick black line appeared. I tried room 12's box again. Nothing. The paper would not take the ink. I pressed harder. The marker tip tore through the sheet. Underneath the torn paper was another security sheet. I had only placed one on the clipboard. The lower sheet appeared old. Its edges were yellow. Every room had been checked, including room 12. My first thought was that it was one of the old pages from the storage binder. Then I saw the date. It showed that night's date. My name was written at the top. The signature looked like mine. I had not signed it. I tore the page from the clipboard. The office phone rang twice and stopped. I removed the receiver. It rang off the cradle. I went to the restroom. The restroom door would not close. Something was blocking it near the floor. I looked down. A brass key lay across the threshold. The round tag showed the number 12. I did not touch it. I stepped over the key and pulled the door shut. The wind struck the building. The walls creaked. The office phone continued to ring. After several minutes, a voice came from the hallway. It was Leah again. Dad? I closed my eyes. Dad, Mom's car stopped. I knew it was not real. My ex-wife and daughter were at home in Tucson. We're near your work. I pressed my back against the restroom door. There's a man by the road. The voice began to cry. It was not dramatic. That made it worse. Leah cries quietly when she is frightened. Her breathing becomes uneven and she tries not to let anyone hear. The voice copied that exactly. Dad, please answer. I did not. The office phone stopped ringing. For a few seconds there was only wind. Then my cell phone rang. The display showed my ex-wife's number. I answered. Daniel? It was her voice. The connection crackled. Our car stopped. I gripped the phone. Where are you? Near the motel. I can see the sign. I opened my mouth but did not speak. She continued. Leah went inside to find you. The call ended. I tried calling back. No service. The motel radio activated in the office. Static filled the hallway. Then Leah's voice came through the speaker. Dad, I'm in room 12. The restroom light went out. I stayed in the darkness, I told myself the call was not real. The motel had heard my ex-wife's voice before. It had listened when I spoke to her on my cell phone. It knew Leah. It knew what I feared. A fire alarm began beeping outside. One short tone every 5 seconds. The alarm panel was mounted behind the front desk. I could see its red light flashing through the restroom doorway. The panel produced an automated voice. Smoke detected. Room 12. A pause. Smoke detected. Room 12. The porch light outside room 12 appeared on the camera monitor. Even from the restroom, I could see its small white square. The radio crackled. Dad, it's Smokey. I stepped into the hall. The key was still on the floor. I moved around it. At the front desk, the alarm panel displayed Zone 12 occupied. The word occupied had never appeared before. I picked up the emergency radio. Red Basin Station, this is Desert View Security. There was no answer. Red Basin, do you copy? Static. Then a male ranger responded. Desert View, confirm your emergency. I described the alarm. The ranger asked whether anyone was inside the room. No. Are you certain? The motel is closed. Then confirm room 12 clear. The clipboard lay beside me. The torn security sheet was gone. A new sheet rested on top. Every room box was empty. The ranger repeated. Confirm room 12 clear. I understood what the motel wanted. It did not want me to open the door. It did not need me to enter the room. It wanted the checkmark. It wanted someone responsible for the property to confirm that room 12 existed and had been inspected. An unchecked room stayed empty. The radio voice said, Mark the room clear and we can cancel the response. I asked for the ranger's name. He gave me the name of a ranger I had met 2 weeks earlier. Then he gave me the correct station code. The details were right. That made the decision harder. If the alarm was real, firefighters might be on their way. They would enter room 12. They might break down the door. If Leah and her mother had actually been stranded nearby, ignoring the radio could cost them their lives. I knew that was unlikely. I also knew unlikely things had been happening to me for months. The radio clicked. Leah spoke again. Dad, please. The smoke alarm continued beeping. I called my ex-wife. The call failed. I sent a text. It remained undelivered. The alarm panel repeated the message. Smoke detected. Room 12. I picked up the pen. The box beside room 12 was not crossed out. It was blank. The other 17 boxes were also blank. I could have marked all the others first. I could have waited. Instead, I held the pen over room 12. I wish I could say I was confused. I was not. I understood the warning. I understood the old logs. I understood that the voices had been leading me toward this exact moment. I also heard my daughter crying through the radio. So I made the mark. It was a small check. 2 quick lines. The smoke alarm stopped. The wind stopped at the same moment. Not gradually. 1 second, sand struck the windows and the walls creaked under the pressure. The next, everything was silent. The radio went dead. The red light on the alarm panel changed to green. The display read, Room 12 registered. I dropped the pen. The registration printer started. A card fed through. Then another. Then another. All 6 security monitors turned black. White text appeared on camera 6. Welcome. The lobby lights dimmed. Somewhere behind the front desk, a lock opened. I heard the click clearly. It came from beneath the floor. Then the phone rang once. I did not answer. The exterior lights came on. Every room door was visible on the monitors again. Rooms 1 through 11 were closed. The door marked 12 stood open. There was only darkness behind it. No smoke. No fire. No Leah. I looked through the lobby window. Outside, the physical door was closed. The camera showed it open. I kept my eyes on the real door. On the monitor, a man stepped out of room 12. He wore a security uniform. He was about my height. He turned toward the office. I looked away before I saw his face. Footsteps crossed the gravel outside. They did not come from the north walkway. They came from behind me. From the back office. I did not move. The steps stopped on the other side of the front desk. A chair rolled backward. Someone sat down. The office phone rang. I remained facing the window. After 2 rings, it stopped. The person behind me lifted the receiver. I heard my own voice say, "Desert View Motor Lodge. How can I help you?" A woman answered through the phone. "We need a room," my voice said. "Room 12 is available." The registration printer stopped. A pen scratched across paper behind me. I waited for an attack. None came. The person in the chair continued speaking softly on the phone, taking information from a guest who was not there. Name, address, vehicle make, number of occupants, length of stay. It sounded like an ordinary motel check-in. When the call ended, the chair rolled forward. The keyboard clicked. A key was removed. Footsteps moved through the lobby. The locked front door opened. It closed again. I stayed where I was until sunrise. At 6:03, Mari arrived. She found me standing beside the window. The clipboard was on the floor. Room 12 had been checked. Mari saw the mark and sat down without speaking. I told her what had happened. She listened. When I finished, she asked, "Did you see who checked in?" "No." "Did you give them a key?" "No." She looked at the board. There were 17 keys. Room 12's box was empty. "That may be good," she said. "Maybe? I've never been here when it happened. What do I do?" "I don't know." "Can I leave?" Mari looked toward the highway. "I don't know." I left anyway. My ex-wife called as soon as I reached an area with service. She and Leah had been home all night. The car was fine. She had not called me during the storm. My phone showed no incoming call from her. It showed one outgoing call at 2:17. The call had lasted 4 minutes. The number listed was my own. For 2 days, nothing happened. On the 3rd night, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. A motel key lay on the carpet. Number 12. I did not touch it. I left through the rear stairwell and stayed at my mother's house. The key was waiting outside her front door the next morning. After that, the phone returned. Sometimes it appeared in my kitchen. Sometimes on the floor beside my bed. It always rang twice. The voices became clearer. Guests complained about the air conditioner. They asked for towels. They reported someone standing in the bathroom. One man said the door would not open. A woman asked why there were no windows. A child whispered that the room was getting smaller. They all called me by name. I followed the phone rule each time. Remove the receiver. Lock myself in a bathroom. Wait for silence. The incidents did not stop. On the 6th day, I returned to the motel. I have worked there ever since. The owner died last year. Jean's sister never found a buyer. The county records now list the property as abandoned, although the electricity remains on and the office phone still works. Jean stopped coming after his health declined. Mari visits twice a week. She leaves food in the refrigerator and collects the log sheets. We do not talk much. There are still 7 rules. I added an 8th. If room 12 has already been checked when you arrive, do not erase the mark. Stay until morning and do not let anyone check out. I do not know whether that rule helps. No one else works nights now. The insurance company stopped asking for security reports. As far as I know, nobody officially employs me. I still make the drive. I arrive before 9. I count the keys without touching them. I lock the lobby at 11:15. I keep camera 6 wide at 2:17. Every morning, the registration printer produces 1 card. I place it in the returns envelope without reading it. The safe should have filled months ago. It never does. Sometimes I hear guests moving through the back office. Doors open where there are no doors. Water runs inside the walls. A television plays behind the restroom tiles. I do not investigate. The room outside with the brass number 12 remains locked. I have never opened it. I do not think that door matters anymore. Room 12 is in the office now. Maybe it always was. The checkmark remains on every new security sheet. I tried replacing the forms with plain paper. The box appeared by midnight. I tried throwing away the clipboard. It was waiting on the desk when I returned. Once, I burned a sheet in the parking lot. The paper turned to ash, but the checkmark remained on the concrete until sunrise. I have not tried again. Leah is 11 now. I no longer answer her calls while I am at the motel. I call her before my shift and again after sunrise. She knows I work nights, but she does not know where. Last week, she asked whether I had ever stayed at the Desert View Motor Lodge. I asked where she had heard that name. She said she had seen it in a dream. In the dream, she was standing inside a motel room with no windows. Someone was knocking from beneath the floor. She said there was a telephone beside the bed. It rang twice. Then it stopped. I told her dreams do not mean anything. She seemed to accept that. I did not tell Mari. I did not tell Jean. There would be no point. Tonight, the motel is quiet. The vacancy sign has not changed. The phone has not rung. Camera 6 showed an empty pool at 2:17. The registration printer has not started. It is almost 5 in the morning. In another hour, I will finish my shift and drive home. A few minutes ago, I counted the keys. There are 17 on the board. That should make me feel better. It does not. The key to room 12 is already in my pocket.